Hello everyone, my name is Kevin and I've been a photographer and filmmaker for the last 10 years, capturing concerts, commercial projects, weddings, landscapes, you name it, and today I'm going to go through everything you need to get started with the Sony FX30. The FX30 is a cinematic powerhouse at a reasonable price, but all of that power comes with some complexity in use and setup that I'm going to help explain here. This video will walk through setup, button layout and functions, key settings you should use, and how to use the camera out in the world to capture cinematic video. Starting off with the FX30, you want to pop in the battery on the bottom, the Sony FX30 that is included with the camera purchase. Next, you'll want to slide the memory card lock and open the memory card door. Inside you'll notice two card slots, which are both UHS 2 SD card slots and CF Express Type A slots. You can choose your memory card based upon the read-write speeds that you want for the shooting that you are planning on doing. I personally use V60 and V90 SD cards, but the FX30 can take CF Express Type A cards for those higher frame rates and bit rates, depending on your use case. Depending on the FX30 kit that you get, it will either come with a top handle audio interface or it won't. To attach that, you need to carefully slide the top handle into the hot shoe of the FX30, making sure to be aware of the small contacts on the inside of the hot shoe. Then you can use a coin or a screwdriver to tighten down the included mounting screws onto the body of the camera. Flick the switch on the handle to on, and you are good to go. For the purpose of this video though, I am not going to use the handle. You'll then want to remove the body cap from the front of the camera and the rear of the lens and twist it until it clicks into place. For the purpose of this video, I'll be using the Sony 15mm f1.4G lens, which is not included with the camera, but it's a great first lens. The next step is to power the camera on using the power switch at the top left corner when looking from the rear of the camera. And then on first power on, the camera will prompt you to set your date and time as well as your time zone. So for me, I'll set it to Wellington and we can go from there. Now that the camera is up and running, I'm going to go through the starting video settings for getting the FX30 set up for cinematic video quality. If you hit the mode button on the back of the camera, it'll bring up all the different shooting modes for photo and video. You can pick the one that works the best for you, but I recommend using the manual video mode for having the most image control. Then one of the most important settings to start out with is your video image quality, especially considering that the FX30 is a cinema camera first, although it can take lovely photos and I will get to that later. Here's where you pick if you are shooting 4K or 1080p. You'll also pick your bitrate, your file format, and your frame rate in this menu as well. I would recommend doing some research about your computer to determine which bitrate it will be able to handle, as some older computers have trouble with higher bit rates and codecs. The major file formats that the FX30 can shoot in are XAVC-HS, which is an H.265 codec that some computers might have trouble with playing, but it will save you some hard drive space as it has smaller file sizes for the same quality. Next, it has XAVC-S, which is an H.264 codec that most computers can play fairly well, but at a cost of slightly larger file sizes. Then the best image quality you can get out of the FX30 comes from the XAVC-SI, which is the highest bitrate that this camera can do, but at the cost of much larger file sizes and a bit more difficulty in editing for some computers. For most of what I personally shoot, XAVC-S has been great as it gives me the best balance between file size, image quality, and playability and editability. You'll have to kind of do your own experimentation in order to find out what works best for your shooting and your workflow. Here's a quick chart that we put together to hopefully be a good reference. A really great aspect about the FX30 is that it has a whole swath of different frame rates for you to use based on the look that you're going for in your films. My most used frame rates are 4K 24 and 4K 60p, but the FX30 does offer 4K up to 120 frames per second as well as 1080p up to 240 frames per second. One of the major benefits of the FX30 being part of the Sony Cinema line is that it has a lot more options when you're wanting to get into log shooting. Under log shooting, there are quite a few options, but for the purpose of this video and kind of getting started, I'll be using the flexible ISO mode, which I think most beginners looking to start color grading their footage are going to want to start with. Turning this on will put the camera into S-Log3 mode, which will give you the most amount of information in your frame at the cost of having to do some color work on your footage in post. If you don't want to quite get into log shooting yet, that's okay. Sony has the S-Cinetone picture profile for you to use, which gives really great color and contrast right out of the camera, ready to go. Part of being in the Sony system means that you get great real-time tracking autofocus, which I use quite a bit in my kind of event run and gun work. You'll want to go into the menu again and go down to the AF/MF section and enable the autofocus, as well as turn the face eye priority in AF to on. That way the camera knows to track faces of people in your frame. Then you can just tap on the screen to track your subjects. The FX30 does include Sony's excellent in-body image stabilization system, which will stabilize the image no matter which lens you have on the camera. I would recommend turning this on if you're wanting to do some handheld shooting when you aren't on a tripod or a gimbal. There are two different modes, standard and active. You'll need to, again, do some of your own tests to kind of see which is best for you, but I personally do use active quite often myself, though it does introduce a small crop into the video image. While being primarily a video camera, the FX30 can still take some really nice photos. In the menu, you'll want to set up the camera to be shooting in RAW in full resolution in order to get the most out of the 26 megapixel sensor. And then you can just go into hit your mode and then go to manual photo mode. One of the great things that I have found about Sony cameras is their immense customizability. You can really set them up best for your style in the menu systems. Personally, I have a few customizations to let me access my zoom for focus, my white balance, my autofocus, and my recording. With the FX30, you can even have 3 dedicated record buttons for easy access no matter how or where your camera is rigged up. We are out at Halswell Quarry on this lovely summer's day. Just wanted to get out of the office to go over some tips and tricks that I've learned from using the FX30 for a few years now. First tip I've found with the FX30 is shoot in 4K. Even if you're delivering on a 1080p project, it's worth having the extra flexibility for cropping and moving your frame around and downsampling in post. It's the best that this camera offers, so it's worth shooting in. My next tip for the FX30 is to use that log recording capability. It can be intimidating, especially if you're just starting out, but it's really worth it to have all the information that the camera can offer, especially in a high dynamic range scene like this with the sun in the frame and some darks in the trees and all that. It's definitely worth learning how to use that log shooting. Sorry about the wind noise. It was just too pretty not to head up here for sunset after being down on the quarry. Next tip, use an ND filter, either a variable ND or a solid ND to help control your exposure. It really helps in those changing situations. As the sun's about to go down. Next tip, with the FX30, especially if you're on the most recent firmware, use shutter angle. It really helps to keep your exposure consistent while you're changing frame rates, especially if I'm going to be using high frame rates like 50 or 100 frames per second. It means it'll just change the shutter speed for me. I can worry about everything else. And as the sun is just about to go, last tip is use manual white balance. Especially for a scene like this, you want to keep your colors consistent as you're shooting. You don't want them changing suddenly. It means you have to change things in post. That's a pain. I've done it before. Manual white balance is worth learning. Okay, well, now that we've endured a bit of a hectic sunset shoot, I think my last tip is going to be just go out and shoot. Doesn't matter if it sucks. You'll get better. You get better by shooting and practicing and editing and just more and more and more. And that's how you'll get better. You'll start to see yourself get better. So just keep shooting. It's worth it. Believe me. Thanks for watching. Sorry if it's windy. Hey, thanks so much for watching, and for more information on how to get the most out of your Sony FX30, check out the article in the video description below. And if you found this even a little bit helpful, hit that thumbs up, share it around, and let me know in the comments what you're using your FX30 for. And if you want us to do any more deeper dive videos on the FX30 to cover topics like timecode or Cine EI or anamorphic shooting, let us know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Now, get out there and make stuff.